Hey guys, GHAZZY here with another Last Epoch build guide video, and in this one we're going to talk about the Crit Chaos Bolt or Chaotic Fissure Warlock build that I showed you in the closed test realm reveal video leading into the launch. I've now been playing this. We're doing about 200 corruption monolith endgame content, having a goddamn blast, enjoying our Circle of Fortune progression. Holy shit, the amount of loot. It's insane. Anyways, the character's gear, I mean, right now, I am not capped in my cold rest nor the void rest. Little tricky. Same thing with the poison rest, is fine. Gear is okay. So what we're doing here is that we are lacking a ton of crit. I have prepped a crystal skull, very important for the crit achievement of 100%. I can't use it because I screw over my resistances pretty badly if I do this on the void rest. So my amulet is also dog shit. So my gear is kind of so-so. I don't have any LP on the Mortality's Grasp, no LP on the Twisted. The gear can use a lot of improvements. So I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to show you the planner that I'm using the guide for. However, if you want to make sure you stay up to date and are reading or watching this guide that I have later than it's posted, make sure you check out the links in the descriptions below, because of the simple fact that you get to my guide hub, in which you can find all of the guides that I have for Last Epoch listed and updated on this page. You can also check out the leveling guide by clicking on the Acolyte and going to the Warlock leveling page, which will bring you to this guide that I've made as well, which will cover how to level the actual build the most effective way that I think you can use to level up the Warlock class. However, once you get up to higher levels, you want to go to the endgame guide, which looks like this, which covers all the details, class passives, skills passives, and everything you'll ever need will be covered in here, including a actual loot filter. You just copy and add that. Don't use the loot filter when you're leveling. Add that later on. You don't need it when you're leveling. So, that said, let's show you the build in action before I'll talk about the details. Playstyle is very simple. Done before you ask, why guess you're using 3 Chaos Bolts? Well, your Chaos Bolt is going to trigger curses for you. Damned is not a curse, which you will do as well. So you use Mortality's Grasp to make sure that your projectiles will trigger a curse consistently. This means that your Chaos Bolt will give you life gain on hit and mana gain on hit, and therefore it will then easily have an access to triggering both Rip Blood as well as your Bone Curse, so you don't need them on your action bar. That means this is a 2-button build plus a mobility, so essentially a 3-button build. So you just cast your Fissure and Chaos Bolts, and then Transplants. So the problem with this is that once you're playing, I'll talk about the negative parts first. When you're playing, you can't use Fissure all the time. Like, you have to be careful, because as you can see, Fissure will start casting Chaos Bolts quite often. That's going to burn your mana. You'll get mana back if they're hitting enemies. So if there's no enemies, you're going to burn mana. So be careful when you're using this. Otherwise, you'll just stick to using your main source of damage output, which is your Chaos Bolt. The other unique is a Twisted Heart. That's how we're going to look at our ward. Every time we cast a spell, we're going to be getting our mana, current life converted into energy shield or ward, and we're going to leech back our HP to make the best use of this. So first I'm going to show you a quick map, see how this goes, in before I die like a noob, we'll see. And then I'll show you a boss as well. This is a 193 corruption, I believe it is. So what I'll do is I'll basically just see if I can get a big group of enemies, and then I'll cast a Fissure if there's good enough size, and then I'll just cast Chaos Bolts and move on. So what's cool with this build is that it's a Warlock, which allows me to have consistent uptime of haste. The Transplant's going to give me Frenzy, but most importantly, the haste comes from killing blows and or hitting a rare or unique enemy. Transplant is also giving me haste as well as Frenzy, which is very, very effective. For those of you who are new to this game, Frenzy gives me 20% increased cast attack speed. Very effective. Whereas the haste gives me a 30% movement speed increase. However, Warlock has a passive node that does this effect for you, and it increases the efficiency that you get from haste by 50%, which means that your 30% movement speed is now a 45% passive movement speed. As you can see here, we're 41, and I transplant, I'm up on 78. So the idea is to almost consistently always have a haste buff, which means that we're always going to be sitting on that 45% increase of movement speed. So that's how we do the clear speed with the build, to be very comfortable. Since this is working very effectively by having on hits versus rare or unique enemies, we're going to be able to have that effect versus bosses at all times, because we're going to be shooting a ridiculous amount of projectiles. So I'm going to shoot another Fissure to show you how ridiculous the mana is if you're overusing Fissure. Look at the mana. I'm going to be unable to cast anything, which is really annoying, which is why it's very important that you use your Chaos Bolt as a main source of damage output, and then combine that with Fissure to add more crit and more damage output. So don't overuse Fissure. It's a very common mistake. My gear could use a lot more, couple of mana regen modifiers, which will minimize this effect as well from happening, which I do not have access to. Let's see if the servers are going to hold it together. And we're going to show you a boss run on a Shade of Oribus, which is around 193 corruption. So let's do this one, and I'll show you how this looks. Pretty simple. Very fun build, very effective. I've done a tier 4 jewel over this, as you've seen in the CT footage. And the cool thing with this build is it tanks a lot, despite the lack of gear. I'll do this. I'll cast my transplant. The main reason for casting transplant here is to get the cast speed bonuses. Versus a boss, I want to make sure that I have my frenzy active. So Shade of Oribus, for those of you who are new to this, always does a random different types of abilities, and it's completely random depending on RNG, which means that in this case he's using these projectiles here, and without having capped chaos, void resistance, I'm gonna want to make sure that they're actually getting cleared off, because they're evidently, as I saw in my HP earlier, a little scary. Other than that, it's just tank and spank for the most part. You can see the mana. This is the mana regeneration issue I was talking about before, which is why I'm going to stop casting my Fissure a little bit, get some mana back while just attacking him and using my transplants for the haste buff, and then he's dead. It's very, very simple to play this build. It is extremely effective. It has a really good clear speed. It pulls off bosses effectively. Again, the problem is balancing the Fissure and your Chaos Bolt. You'll get the hang of it once you play the build. I'm lacking a lot of mana regen nodes, so instead of showing the gear I have, because my gear is kind of half-assed, I'm going to show you the planner instead. So this is the planner used for this build. First off, passives, which is apparently super bugged. There we go, passives. In the Acolyte tree, holy shit, this is screwed up. Let's show you in game instead. In the Acolyte tree, we're going to go for Bone Aura for some armor and minion armor nodes. Now, you could move these points over to Blood Aura if you're going to use the modifier for crit avoidance, rather than having the reduced damage taken from crits. Now, luckily, I was able to get a pair of nice boots. Shout out to King Konger for them, by the way. Allowing me to have this type of layer of defense instead of crit avoidance. You can do both routes. I like this one, but puts a little bit more pressure on gear. So these 6 points can be moved around here depending on how you choose to layer your defense. I put 8 points for intelligence, 1 point in the ward, and 5 for ward retention, and a little bit of rest. And then in the Lich tree, we're going to take this very last. We don't care about this early on. We're going to focus on the Warlock tree for the most part. That's 5 points in here, that's allowing us to get some mana regen. And we're going to have Occultist Mind for the mana per intelligence. 5 points in Harrowing, very good for defensive layer, and which also gives us access to ward per second. But most importantly, if the enemy is cursed, and every unique curse makes us take 2% less damage for them. This is how we tank things when the gear is actually properly sorted. Outside of this, this is also our sources of a leech, and we're going to have enemies always be cursed, so this is 2.5% leech. And that allows us to put in points in Withering on chance and hits. And since we're shooting so many projectiles, we're going to be able to have this effect consistently, allowing us to take less damage once we have 5 points. I haven't taken this yet, which will make this build significantly tankier. 10 points for Intelligence Vitality. You are going to max out Chaotic Strikes when you're max level. I am currently level 95. We're going to max this out later. And then 5 points into the Critical Strike Multi, since we're going for 100% chance to crits. Fleeting Crone is the haste node I was talking about. Very important to max this out. Makes the builds fly through the monolith. It's really, really nice. And then here's the most overpowered node in the entire game. This gives us increased cast speed and additional cast speed for curses. But most importantly, when you reach low life, this is a bit contradictory, because the description says ward gain per cleansed curse on you is 100. But the text says that when you are in low life, it will cleanse all curses on you and on enemies within 15 meters, and you'll gain ward per curse that is cleansed this way. In many times when I've been clearing in monoliths, I've managed to, in very rare occasions, hit low life, and suddenly I'm just 5, 6, 7, 8,000 wards. Just like that. What makes this node so overpowered is that this shit is on a 5-second cooldown. And as long as you're attacking, everything is going to have a ton of curses on them. So it's really crazy how insane this node is. Anyways, so I put about 55 points in here, and then I focus on the Lich node because I can get intelligence with mana regen, bit of extra damage. It's actually a really bad node, but it's the best we can use. And then a little bit of extra damage from here, so we can reach mana and ward retention for the defensive layer. And then intelligence, reduce health regen, because we're not going to care about regen. So that's basically how the tree looks and how it's designed. The remaining points I'm lacking is 4 points in here, another point in here. That puts me on the 5 points around level 85, and that's the tree. Gear-wise, like I mentioned, you want to use Mortality's Grasp. Preferably, you want to have a legendary potential with cast speed. You can go for intelligence. You can go for life, for example, would be really good as well. Twisted Heart, same thing there. Cast speed. You can do crit. You can do necrotic damage or health. Boots, we go for war decay threshold or the crit reduction boots, depending on how you want to play it. Movement speed, intelligence, health. Make sure your resistances are pretty much capped across the board. Poison, just don't stay in poison pools, you'll be fine. Rings, this is where I'm lacking in game. I don't have mana regen on them. Intelligence, fist resistance, or any resistance, but make sure that you have rest covered across the board so you can have that health roll here. It will make a huge difference in your defensive layer. Belt, mana regen, necrotic damage, crit avoidance, or the reduced damage from crits together with a hybrid health is the best play here. Same thing in the other ring as the other one. The amulet, preferably a cast speed base, crit multi necrotic damage. You can even use things like spell damage. You need to have a certain amount of spell crit, which I'll talk about in a bit. So you could put a spell crit instead of necrotic damage here. Double rest. And the helmet, preferably intelligence. You don't need exalted version of the chaos chaos bolt projectiles, because the difference is not that big. The intelligence is actually more important, but having the modifier of making your chaos bolt cast have a chance to shoot even more projectiles is insanely good. And then resistances and a percent HP is the best play here. Chest piece, you can go for a crit base or a cast speed. If you solve the crit elsewhere, cast speed base is better. Then here is a good opportunity to place increased critical strike through having a shared crit with you and your minions. You don't use minions, so it's fine. Intelligence and double HP. The wand, the way you make the wand is a profane wand or a dragon horn wand, which are two of the best bases. You want to have necrotic, crit multi, spell damage, cast speed are the 4 prefixes. However, the spell crit I'll talk about in a bit. Crit multi is the most important one. Cast speed on the wand, you preferably would like to seal. I think I actually managed to do that in game. So you see here I have a sealed modifier of cast speed on this, and then I have crit multi and I have spell damage, which works the same way as necrotic damage for this build, so it's fine. But if you can seal a cast speed, that would be preferable. The only thing that's important here is when it comes to the suffixes. Necrotic penetration and mini necrotic penetration is obviously the play. But the reason we have ignite here, you don't need a high tier. Tier 1 is more than enough. Way more than enough. But you're gonna want to have an ignite chance, and the 1 is the best place to put this. And so before I explain the reason of the ignition, let's talk about crits. The way this build is set up is to make your Chaos Bolt have 13% base crit. And then you can ramp that base crit up with a 6% roll Crystal Skull implicit to 19% crit. Since we're using Fissure to provide Acid Skin, which is an additive crit strike chance of 20%, we then provide us with a situation where you need to reach 80% chance to critical strike. Now, 19% to get to 80%, you will need 322% increased critical strike chance. You'll get 80.19 or something. More than that is okay. And that's how, but it's kind of wasted, but it's not bad because you're not going to have Fissure 24/7. But that's how you get 100% chance to crit versus bosses. So when you have that set up, that means that you can move the where you put this crit anywhere on your gear. So there's availability for spell crit on your amulet. You can get crit base or cast speed base on your chest, crit on your chest piece. You can get spell crit strike chance on your weapon. And most importantly, you can get critical strike chance on your stout idols, which is what we're doing. Crit and then suffix with HP, whilst our large idols have percent HP and ward retention. All of them are the same. So the way this is then set up is that if you have that, then you can change those modifiers for anything that gives you damage, such as necrotic damage or spell damage. Why are we using Ignite then? Let's go through that, but before we tackle that, let me quickly run through the blessings. We're going to use Critical Strike Multiplier. If you need crit strike chance and you get that, use that till you get one, but crit multi is the play. We use a Lightning Rest on the ending the storm. We can use Critical Strike Avoidance. Now, if you do the reduced damage from crit damage and with armor modifiers instead, then just change to an all resistance mod. We're going to use Frostbite. Same reason for the Ignite, which I'll cover in a second. And then we're going to have shredded necrotic resistance as the last one. So, skill-wise, why on earth are we using Ignite? This node right there. So, essentially, we are going to create bleed effects from our Rip Blood. We're going to have Ignite from our Wand, Frostbite from our Blessing, and Damned from the Tree. As long as an enemy has one stack of any of these, that's 12% more damage. Times 4 if you have all 4 on the targets. That's an insane amount of extra damage. So the way you play the Chaos Bolt is by taking the cast speed, prod speed first, then bomb rushing with 1 point in Doom's Vindication, picking up Devour the Damned, because this is how we sustain the mana, and also making sure that we have the curse. So if you don't have the gloves, you're going to have to manually cast the Bone Curse on every target before you cast Chaos Bolts. Then you're picking up Curse Blood, automating the Bone Curses, and automating your Rip Blood, Base of Intelligence. After this, we go for crit and AoE, as well as 1 point in the extra projectiles. You only sustain this if you have a 1 that reduces the cost by 3, because this is going to cost you 15 mana. The 1 makes it cost 12, and this node will make you cover it. So that's how the Chaos Bolt is set up. Rip Blood, we are going to be taking the necrotic damage change and making it give us ward, and then have 2 points in here. We're not going to cast it, so the cast speed is irrelevant. This is where we pick up the bleed, and the left side is where we get our life from it, which is turned into ward. The Bone Curse itself is very straightforward. Get the kill threshold. Most importantly, we're getting armor shred from this, as well as making it deal necrotic damage, and also making it mark for death. It's allowing us to have the approach of it with the mark duration, and these approaches even before the gloves. But once the gloves comes into play, we're going to do damage with this and shred armor, and the Chaos Bolt will trigger this automatically. Transplant is also very simple. Like I mentioned with the Haste and Frenzy, we're going to start with Acolyte's Fervor, and then you have 2 different choices. You can either take the Cursed Exile or the Rain of Blood. Now, I'm personally a big fan of the Rain of Blood, and you can take the physical damage to necrotic. So if you do this with a Twisted Heart unique, you actually get a skill point, because now it's a necrotic skill. So this is just a free node. But most importantly is the Acolyte's Fervor, and then we're going to take the Bone Armor and the defensive stats for that you get from this. Chaos Fissure is a little, Chthonic Fissure is a little special. This node right there, you want to max this out. So what this does is that when you cast it, if there's a cursed enemy nearby or within 20 meters, you actually get a ton of mana back after casting it. So essentially, you want to make sure that you cast your Bone Curse, then Chthonic Fissure. Or if you have the gloves, you want to cast a couple of Chaos Bolts, then cast Fissure, to not make it cost a ton of mana. You want to increase the Spirit Release chance, as well as shredding Necrotic Res, and the Spirit Frequency, ramp that up, and get that so that your Fissure is going to cast Chaos Bolts. This is why you have to be careful to not overuse the Fissure, your mana is going to crash. And then that's going to be even more important as you take the double one. Early game, you might not want to do the secondary Fissure, just have one normal length, and then when you're getting a bit better gear, smack in the secondary Fissure so that it's a big ass long line. It looks beautiful. Look at the size of this thing. Yes, I'm compensating for something, but that's how it is. Anyways, once you're done with that side, you're going to go for the nodes ramping into Forbidden Chasm so that you can get the asset skin for the crit. And that's essentially the way this build is set up and how it's played. And I don't really have much more to add to it. I've been having a blast. It's fantastic to play. Since the gloves are somewhat important to make the guild build a bit more comfortable to play, I think the Merchant Guild is one of the best factions to do when you're playing to get build enabling items. I am personally a bigger fan of Circle of Fortune. I think it's crazy how good it is. But if you do play Circle of Fortune, you're going to have to farm this. And you can check out this in Last Epoch Planner or Last Epoch Tools. And it's going to tell you to farm Ending the Storm to find these gloves. And that's about it. Yeah, let me not waste more of your time. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hit the like button, subscribe for more content. And leave a comment down below what you guys think of the build. And I'll hit you guys in the next one. Till then, stay safe and keep rocking.